Scholomance Academy is here, and that means it's time to review the Paladin cards. First up, we have Blessing of Authority. It is a 5-mana spell that gives a minion +8/+8, but it cannot attack heroes this turn. For what it's worth, if you wanted to attack heroes with a minion, you could attack first and then buff it, so there's some flexibility there, and you can still attack minions after the buff. So I think overall this card is pretty strong. If you were a 5-mana 8/8 neutral card, pretty much everyone would want to play that, and this is kind of similar, but slightly not as good, as you need to have a minion on board. I still think there's some synergy with other cards within the set, and overall it's a pretty big boost. So for that reason, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 in terms of overall card quality, and I think a 3 out of 5 as I don't think Paladin still has enough tools to be kind of a top tier deck yet. But it is worth mentioning, and throughout the entire set, that they're just a couple cards away from finding a kind of a pure Paladin deck list that works, and a Highlander Paladin. Like, both of those archetypes are just kind of almost good but not good, and I think it'll be really useful to think about that as we look at the cards in the future. Moving along, we have Judicious Jr. This is a 6-mana 4/9 with lifesteal. This card is just too slow. It's very simple. The stats are like pretty good, but it would need to have like rush or something in order for it to be, or taunt, something that's actually like immediately defensive. I think by the time you play this card, aggro's already killed you or very close to killed you, and you just can't afford to do essentially nothing for 6 mana in that turn. And I don't think this pressures control very well either, so it doesn't really, not really very good versus aggro, and it's not very good versus control. That makes it a 1-star across both categories. Next up we have Commencement. This is a 7-mana spell that summons a minion from your deck and gives it Divine Shield and Taunt. This is kind of a redundancy if you're playing dual Paladin, which is not a very good deck, but again, it is nice to have more spells than just dual, even if they cost more mana, to be able to kind of pull out your strong minions. Still, I think this card is not good enough to see play in Paladin especially, and I'm going to give it a 1 across both categories. Next up we have Wave of Apathy. I think this card is actually pretty decent. It just depends on, it needs the right circumstances for it to work out. The way I look at it is it's kind of like a timeout, but for 2 less mana and, you know, significantly less effective. But 2 less mana is a lot. Like, you basically could make an entire board only have a couple of attack and survive another turn. But the thing is, I think this is a lot stronger in Priest, and we'll review it separately in Priest because of kind of Cabal minion stealing interactions, and I don't think Paladin has that. Still, you know, maybe this fits into Highlander Paladin in some decks, and if we ever get a Control Paladin, it could also be good. It's really hard to say with this card. I think it is actually like a 3 out of 5 in terms of card quality, and maybe a 2 out of 5, as I think people will experiment with it, but I just don't think it's there yet. It's sort of fringe playable at the moment, and I don't think we have enough pieces to support it. Next up we have Shield of Honor. This is another card that is very, very strong in a different class. I think this is amazing in Warrior, and in Paladin, Paladin just doesn't really have ways to damage their own minions, and that actually is quite difficult. Like, just waiting for your minions to be damaged organically makes this card a dead card very, very often. And so for that reason, I think I'm going to give this card only like a 2 out of 5 in terms of overall card quality in the class, and probably a 2 out of 5 in terms of meta relevance as well, as I think people will end up dropping this just because it doesn't really work out. It's not as strong as you think of it as it is. Not as strong as you think it would be in this class. Next up we have another dual class card, Lord Baerov. I think this is quite a good card, even in Paladin. I think this is just very, very strong. There's not too much to say about this. This is like a cheaper equality and Whirlwind kind of combination on a body. Just a very solid card. I think I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 in terms of overall card quality, because I don't think it's at that nerf point yet, but it's still very strong. And then probably a 4 out of 5 in meta relevance, as I think it's going to be one of the best cards that Paladin can run. Next up we have High Abyss Allura. This is a 4-mana 3/6 with a spell burst that will cast a spell from your deck and target this minion if possible. I think this is significantly better in Paladin, which is where we're reviewing it, as Paladin has a lot of buff spells and a lot of pretty solid buff spells. I think this card is actually quite good. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. As for meta relevance, again, it's tricky to say if Paladin will kind of reach a tier 2, but maybe with like a pure Paladin list or something, so I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 for meta relevance as well. Next up we have Argent Braggart. This is a 2-mana 1/1 that has Battle Cry, gain attack and health to match the highest on the battlefield. So to explain, if you had an 8/8 minion on the field, this would become a 9/9, but if you had an 8/1 and a 1/8, it would also become a 9/9. It takes the highest attack and the highest health, combines them. So this is a very, very strong card. I actually think this is a card that is probably too strong. Like, you would be willing to play this for 3 mana and be pretty happy with it. I think one of its strongest qualities is that it's pretty good early on. Like, you know, maybe you see a 4/4 or something and you play this and it's a cheap, good minion. But then later on, like, it's a great top deck still. Like, it's basically top decking a 2 mana 5/5, 7/7, 8/8, whatever it is. It's kind of like a faceless manipulator for like 2 mana, and I think that's just insane. So I'm actually going to give this card a 5/5. I think it probably would be nerfed if Paladin became super, super competitive, but just it's at that level of power. It's clear 5/5, and then probably a 4/5 in terms of meta relevance. Moving along, we have Devout Pupil. This is a 6 mana 4/5 Divine Shield. It's a very reminiscent of Sunwalker, except it gets discounted for every friendly spell that you cast on your characters this game. And it does say characters, so that includes your face. If you heal your face or whatever, it'll get discounted. I think this is pretty good, and you'd probably be happy playing it for around 3 or 4 mana. And I don't think it's that unreasonable for it to hit that level. So I'm going to give this a 4/5 in terms of card quality, as I think you could easily play this in like the Libram Paladin decks we've been seeing, and probably a 3/5 in terms of meta relevance. Next up, we have Gift of Luminance. This is a 3 mana spell that will summon a copy of a minion, a 1/1 copy of a minion, and give it Divine Shield. I think this card is okay. I think it could be really powerful in some situations if you had a strong Death Rattle or something similar, maybe a lot of Libram buffs on a single card. But in general, it's just okay. It doesn't curve out super well. You don't want to put this on like a 1/1 and get another 1/1 with Divine Shield. That's not great. And so for that reason, I would say it's like niche playable. You'd have to have a lot of factors come together to make it work. And so for that reason, 2/5 across both categories. Next up, we have the 8 mana Priest Legendary Turalyon the Tenured. This is an 8 mana 3/12 with Rush that whenever it attacks a minion, it sets its attack and health to 3. I think this card is actually pretty bad and people are kind of overrating it. It reminds me very much of, I think her name is Natalie Celine, the Priest card, where it's an 8 mana 8/1 that gets the health of whatever minion it kills. Like, it destroys a minion and then gets its health. I think this is actually like worse than that. Most of the time you're going to have an 8 mana 3/9, which is pretty slow for 8 mana. Like, maybe if it had lifesteal, it would, you know, heal you back a bit. Maybe if you had Rush and it could kill 2 minions, but I just don't think you're really getting enough, and no one looks at like an 8 mana 3/9 that killed a minion and goes like, whoa, that's just gonna change everything. I think it's like Assassinate, but for 3 more mana you get a 3/9. Like, is that really worth the 8 mana bundling? Like, it's just so slow. So I'm gonna give this card a 1/5 and a 1/5. I think this card sucks. Next up, we have Ceremonial Maul. This is a 3 mana 2/2 weapon with a spell burst effect that lets you gain the stats of the spell you played to make a student with taunt. So for example, if you played this on 3 and then Blessing of Kings on 4, you would get a 4/4 with taunt, which would be quite powerful. However, I think it can be tricky to actually get that curve to work. So this is one of those cards that, like, it really depends on the scenario. Like, I think in some cases you're going to be wanting to play things like Consecration on 4, and then it's pretty good. You know, maybe versus Demon Hunter, you're really happy to play a Consecration, maybe clear a minion that Consecration couldn't kill, and then get a 4/4. Like, that's solid. But then in other situations, you don't want to play Consecration early. Maybe you want to play Blessing of Kings, but you don't have a minion on board. Stuff like that is where the math starts to get a bit fuzzy as to whether or not this is worth it. So I think I'm going to give this a 3/5 in terms of card quality, and a 3/5 in meta relevance, as I think, you know, Pure Paladin or Highlander Paladin probably wants this, but it's still not amazing. I think it's just solid, but with the right tools could become better. Next up, we have First Day of School. This is a 0 mana spell that lets you add 2 random 1-cost minions to your hand. I think this is actually super, super strong. I think right now Paladin doesn't have a lot of great 1-drops, and this would kind of give you more fuel for that, and it kind of could replace a 1-drop. It's also a great spell burst activator, and just in general, 0 mana spells are quite good. So I think this is like a pretty solid card. I think it's going to end up in Pure Paladin or Highlander Paladin. The other nice thing too is, like, if Pure Paladin wants to run this, they can't run other good 1-drops because they can only run Paladin cards, and this kind of gives them access to 1-drops that they might otherwise want to run. So for that reason, I'm going to give it a 4/5 in terms of overall card quality, and probably a 3/5 in terms of meta relevance. I think it's still not going to be a tier 1 deck. Last but not least, we have Goody 2 Shields. This is a 3 mana 4/2 with Divine Shield, and Spell Burst gain Divine Shield. I think this card is pretty good. You know, Divine Shield is at least worth 1 health, so it's a 3 mana 4/3 that then gets another Divine Shield. pretty solid. I don't think it's like blowing me away, but I think it's a solid 3 across the board. 3 to 5 for overall card quality and 3 to 5 for meta rating. And that's it for the Paladin cards. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and make sure to subscribe and check out the other reviews.